Hey everybody, SchwayZ here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about over 15 cool, fun facts and features about the 2021 Cadillac CT5-V. Now, before we get started, I do want to give a huge thank you to TJ Chapman Auto for giving me the opportunity to review this vehicle for you all today. If you guys are interested in a used vehicle, just so you know, they do ship vehicles nationally. Make sure you reach out to them. I'm going to put their contact information down in the description below so you can check them out. Now, this particular Cadillac is for sale at TJ Chapman Auto, so if you guys are interested, I'm going to put a link down below directly to this vehicle if it's still for sale by the time you're watching this video. Okay, now about the CT5-V. Well, of course, this is the perfect day to film because it is raining cats and dogs out here, so why not film a video on a Cadillac? But anyways, you guys asked for it. Here it is. This is the CT5-V. And you might be wondering, what is this vehicle? And to address the elephant in the room, this is not the BLACKWING. So the BLACKWING is kind of the high performance, high displacement, big V8 version of the Cadillac CT5, whereas this vehicle actually serves kind of a different purpose. So to give you guys a summary about the V series, if you guys are not aware, V from Cadillac is kind of the high performance version of the Cadillac series sedans. So you have the CT4V, you have a CT5V. This kind of traces its lineage back to the Cadillacs from the early 2000s, with the CTS-V being the very first version of a high performance, essentially Corvette engine inside of a Cadillac sports sedan type of vehicle. Starting in 2020 with the CT5V, that's where things took a little bit of a different turn. This is where they kind of entered into what Mercedes and BMW are doing with their M Sport sedans or their AMG 43 series. These aren't the ultra high-end, super high performance vehicles like the AMG C43 or the BMW M3. These are kind of mid-range performance cars where they still have really good power, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute, but they're not ultra expensive and super high performance like some of those other vehicles are. This one's kind of the entry-level performance V-Series sedan, and you're able to get into some of these vehicles for a slightly better price. So let's get started and let's talk about the design. Now, this is one thing that I think Cadillac has really nailed down really well. Personally, I was never a huge fan of the original CTS-V back from the 2000s. I thought it looked a little too blocky, a little too square. Like Jeremy Clarkson described it, it's like they designed it with a ruler. Here, on the other hand, I think it's actually a really good design. I think they finally figured it out with some smooth curves along the hood, but then still some sharp lines, as you can see on the side of the vehicle. Here with the 2020 redesign that they did, I think it's actually a really good design. But what I really like about Cadillac is there's no confusing this for anything else. I mean, their design language is 100% Cadillac. I mean, you see this on the road, you're not going to mistake this for like a Mercedes or a BMW. It's a totally different type of design language, and I like that. I think a lot of other competitors in the industry are trying to mimic a lot of the Germans or the Japanese, whereas Cadillac kind of strikes on its own, and I really like that design. I mean, it's sharp, it's muscular, it looks aggressive, very handsome exterior. There are some parts that people don't like this fake little piece of plastic for the trim near the rear quarter panel, and maybe the fact that it is more of a hatch design, even though it doesn't have an actual hatchback. Some people do complain about that. I don't complain about it. I think this is a handsome looking exterior. Okay, so I did say this is still a high performance sedan, even though it doesn't have a big displacement V8. So you may be wondering, what is this engine? Well, this is actually a twin turbocharged 3-liter V6 engine that produces 360 horsepower and 405 pound-feet of torque. Definitely not small figures by any means, although I do think the horsepower figures do feel a little bit low for a high-performance sports sedan, but we'll see what that feels like when I get behind the wheel. Now, in case you're wondering, this vehicle does have the option of either all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, and this power is sent through a 10-speed automatic transmission, which is really fantastic. And again, I'll show you what that feels like inside of the driver's seat, but this is the same automatic that they use in a lot of different GM products, similar to the Camaro ZL1 and some of the other high-performance vehicles that GM offers. So a really good transmission overall. And in case you're wondering about fuel economy, well, you get about 18 in the city and 26 on the highway for a combined 21. And in terms of 0 to 60, this can do it in the rear-wheel drive version at 4.6 seconds and the all-wheel drive version at 4.8 seconds because of the extra weight. Okay, for the next feature, we have to talk about the quad exhaust system and hear what it sounds like. You know, personally, I think it sounds pretty good for it not being a V8 engine under the hood. Now, I will say on the interior cabin, and I'm sure you'll hear this in the drive along, but Cadillac does pump in some interior noise to make it sound a little bit more aggressive. Now, another interesting feature that you can get in the CT5-V is something called magnetic ride control. And you may have heard of it from other GM products, but what that does is the vehicle can actually read the road ahead and adjust the dampening on the suspension up to 1,000 times per second to give you the best type of ride handling and dynamics and performance when you're doing some spirited driving in the CT5-V. Now, the last item I want to point out on the exterior has to do with the tires. You do get Michelin Pilot Sport 245 wide millimeter tires riding on 19-inch wheels, and every single CT5-V does come with Brembo brakes. Now, these do have the V Series logo on them, and you can get them in different colors depending on what option you choose. Now, the next neat touch as we're going on the inside has to do with the lighting on the door handle. As you can see here, this does have this little light strip. Really nice touch, kind of hard to see here in the daylight, but this does have an illuminated door handle, and this no longer has a door handle that actually pops out. You actually have a button located down here, which is what you push to actually open the door. It's kind of an electronic release. Okay, getting inside of the vehicle, let's talk about the interior design, which also looks very nice. Let's do a quick 360 so you guys can see what that looks like. I do like these two-tone leather seats. Looks really nice here. Anytime you get two-tone in a luxury vehicle, or really any vehicle, I get excited. So let's take a look at the back, and I'll hop in there to show you what that looks like here in just a second as well. But overall, a really nice interior, and we're going to talk about some of the features here in just a second, but really nice job from Cadillac, going above and beyond from what they were probably 5-10 years ago in the previous generations. They really weren't the best, and now I think they are really right up on top of their game here in terms of Cadillac interiors. You do have soft touch material. You guys know I get giddy about that kind of stuff all throughout this door panel, and then soft touch all along this dashboard over here. Even up here is soft touch material. No cheap plastics like you would find on some other lower end brands, but you do have hard touch plastic down here, which is kind of common for vehicles of this price point. You do have your electronic release trunk, and then just your typical lighting controls and heads up display over here right below the vent, along with your emergency parking brake. Coming to the steering wheel, really nice leather wrap. You do have your cruise control settings over here on the left-hand side, along with your Bluetooth audio and your heated steering wheel. And then on the right-hand side is just kind of your menu for your center display, which we'll talk about in a second. And then you do have your volume controls. I'm going to talk about this V button in just a minute because that's a cool touch on the Cadillac. Of course, this beautiful Cadillac logo. Coming over here, you have this really nice touchscreen, which works really well. Your vents over here. You have some climate controls. Now, for everybody complaining about not having physical buttons for climate controls anymore, well, the Cadillac CT5 still has that. Really nice buttons over here. They don't feel cheap by any means. Even these ones down here, I wouldn't say they feel cheap like some other car reviewers have said. Overall, a really nice interior. You know, you've got this really cool stitching throughout the entire dash, along with the seats, which looks really good. You know, there's really a lot of attention to detail here. You've got your wireless charging, you've got your shifter over here, your drive mode selector over here behind the shifter, where you can go through all the different features, including your auto start stop. This is your controller for the touchscreen, and I'll show you how that works. You've got two cup holders over here with this little opening, and then a somewhat smaller and center arm console. There's really not that much space in here. It's not very deep, but at least you have one, and you do have a little space to put your phone if you choose to. That way you're not always having to constantly charge it if you have it in the vehicle. Coming up here, you do have your typical controls for your home link, where you open your garage doors. And then kind of interesting here, but you do have a dual panoramic sunroof. So it's odd that you don't have just one large one. They actually separated it into two with this pillar over here, and then it kind of opens from the center and closes from the center as well. I do wish they just had a larger panoramic sunroof. I don't really know why they added this here. I get that this will open up, which is nice, but I have seen that done with just like a black pillar that comes across over here, but still keeps the entire roof glass. So that is something I'm going to knock it for, but at least the rear seats kind of have their own sunroof as well. Now, speaking of design, my particular tester over here does have the carbon fiber package, and as you can tell, I'm sure, there is a little bit of red hue inside of this carbon fiber. What's cool about that is this red hue or red weave inside of the carbon fiber actually matches the red stitching throughout the interior of the vehicle. So you can definitely notice it here. You can see the red over here on the carbon fiber and red on the stitching. That's a really nice touch, especially for a vehicle at this price point to come with those kind of, high-end, ultra luxury or ultra performance features is really nice to see. But now that I've teased pricing so much, let's talk about how much the CT5-V costs. And that is really this vehicle's selling point and why I'm okay with it not having a large displacement V8, because the pricing is actually pretty reasonable. You can pick up a Cadillac CT5-V brand new for around the mid $50,000 range. They start around $51,000, but you're probably not going to find one like that on the dealership lot. And you can get this to over $75,000, but you could probably find a reasonably priced and reasonably equipped one for just around $60,000 to $65,000. That is a pretty good bargain considering the vehicles this car competes with. Now, Cadillac likes to compare this vehicle to the C43 AMG and the BMW 340i M Sport. Personally, I think this more competes with a mid-size sedan like the E-Class and the 5 Series. But let's say we're comparing it to the C43. The C43 starts just around $60,000, but again, you're likely not going to find one that low on a dealership lot, so you're looking at probably about a $5,000 to $10,000 premium over the CT5-V. Now, you do get a little bit more horsepower, you do get a little bit better 0 to 60, but you don't get as much rear leg room, which is exactly why I compare this closer to like a 5 Series or an E-Class, because it is about the same length as those vehicles. Speaking of size, this vehicle length is 194 inches. The Mercedes E-Class is around 195 inches. That's the reason why I think it's a better comparison to compare the CT5-V to something like the E53 AMG or the BMW 550 M Sport. Now, those vehicles are even more expensive than the CT5-V. And again, they may have a little bit more horsepower, but you're really getting a bargain with the CT5-V because you get a mid-size sports sedan with tons of power under the hood for potentially 10 to 20 grand less than some of the competition. Now, to talk about the next feature I want to discuss, I'm going to have to turn this vehicle on. It really does have a pretty good startup sound. Now, the feature I want to discuss are the drive modes. So as I showed you earlier here, you can cycle through your drive modes by pushing these buttons. Well, when you do that, it will actually cycle through snow or ice, track mode, sport mode, or touring, and then obviously you have my mode where you can customize your own settings. Now, there is one more drive mode that you can activate, which I kind of hinted towards earlier, is this V button on the steering wheel. Now, this is similar to the Z button on Corvettes, but what that does is it activates a specific type of drive mode that you can customize a bunch of different settings. And I've pulled up those settings over here on the screen. So as you saw, not only does it customize and change this display, but I can also pull up all of the things that I can adjust using the V mode. So I can make it, super track oriented in terms of its steering. I can make the brake feel a little bit more like in touring mode. I can make the engine sound a little bit quieter. And I actually noticeably could hear the sound of the exhaust coming down a little bit because it does actually regulate the sound of the exhaust when you push this V button. And I like that even sitting in the car at idle, I can tell that this vehicle is regulating those things and it's not just a simple kind of gimmick or something like that that's making it sound different. What I do like is you do also have a stealth mode for your engine sound. So if you're pulling into a driveway or something, in the middle of the night, you could put that on. But I'm going to keep it on track mode, and I just heard the exhaust get a little bit louder. I'm going to put this brake feel all the way to the end, and that way we can see what that feels like when I'm driving on the road. Now, I've already kind of showed you what this looks like, but the next feature I want to discuss is this 12-inch instrument gauge cluster display. Now, this is actually new for 2021. If you got a 2020 model year, you wouldn't even have this as an option, but I'm really glad they integrated this. It's very similar to what I've seen in the C8 Corvette, and it's a really nice system. I mean, there's not too much to discuss here. You really just go through the tiles using this left and right button on the steering wheel, and then you can scroll through the features. You have a lot of cool things here like 0 to 60, your G-forces, lap timers, really nice features for performance. You have your driver assistance features, your audio, of course, and you can also regulate your audio through your Seek track buttons over here, and then your audio increase, decrease over here. A pretty relatively simple system, but I do like that when you do change to different drive modes, it does change the way this display looks. So specifically when you put it into track mode or sport mode, it does make it look a little bit different. And then the V mode See, that looks really cool in track mode. But then when you put it in V mode, it does look really nice as well. On the left-hand side, you do kind of have your need-to-know information on your boost and oil temperature, etc. And then this is the other display I wanted to talk about, which is a 10-inch infotainment screen. Now, for those of you that know me and have seen my videos before, I'm a huge fan of Cadillac, Chevy, GM, infotainment screens. I think they've come a long way from the old Cadillac infotainment screens where you had, haptic feedback where the entire unit would vibrate every time you push a button, and your climate control was using a slider. I mean, it was cool in idea, but not very good in execution. This is much better. I mean, a much simpler system. I gotta say, I think Cadillac, Chevy, GM, they have some of the quickest acting systems and software that I've seen in the industry. I mean, there's no lag here. I mean, it instantly moves. Really, really nice intuitive system and really simple. I mean, there's just a few screens here that you cycle through and you can easily figure out exactly where you need to go. And you do have a physical home button here as well. So that's something that a lot of people like, but you also have the home button here, and then you have your buttons over here for just your quick access items. And I believe these are customizable, so you can change these up. Now, what's interesting here is you have multiple ways to manipulate the icons on the screen. One way is using this little controller knob here, and as you can see, it cycles through the different apps that you have. Really nice to do, really quick acting buttons as well. But when you come down here, this is a third way that you can activate this screen, and this is similar to kind of the German vehicles. And this is how you can regulate it, where if you're driving, hands on the steering wheel, you may have your hand down here, and rather than reaching and trying to find it, you can quickly cycle through there as well. So there's 3 different ways to regulate the screen. There's also 3 different ways to adjust the volume. You have your volume knob over here, you have another volume knob over here, and then you can obviously function the volume over here on the steering wheel. So no matter where your hand is located, you do have a way to access the volume. That way you're not constantly moving your hand. Really nice touch there. And coming down just below that screen, you do have heated and ventilated seats on the CT5 as well. So that is a nice touch from Cadillac. One cool thing I've seen on other Cadillac products is this NFC section over here. So what that is it's the near field communication. So if you put your phone next to this little NFC over here, it will actually pull up a screen and have you enable a connection with the vehicle rather than having to go through your menus and try to connect Bluetooth that way. Down here, another couple buttons I want to talk about. You do have a parking assist button, and when you push the button, it will search for a parking spot, and you can do either parallel, perpendicular, and actually self-park the vehicle. Now, I've shown this in other cars, but it's nice that you have a direct button to do that rather than having to search through the infotainment screen. The other thing that I really love that they have a direct button for is this 360-degree camera. So when you push this button, it will actually instantly pull up your 360 camera. Thank you, thank you, thank you, GM, Chevy, Cadillac, for putting an actual physical button to actually pull up your camera. That was one complaint I had with the Equinox, where I couldn't find a direct camera, and they fixed that in this vehicle. And Chevy does a really good job with all of the camera angles, all of the different positions, and the fact that you can zoom into particular sections of the vehicle to see what you're looking at is really nice. Now, there are some other competitors now that are doing kind of a floating 360 camera as if a drone is flying around. This doesn't have that, but it is still a really nice system. And I think a lot of those floating systems are kind of a little bit more gimmicky than they are functional. This, you can immediately see what's in the vicinity around you, and that way you're not really going to hit anything when you're pulling into a parking spot. One last feature I want to discuss in this infotainment screen is called the video recorder button. And if you plug in a SD card into the trunk, this vehicle will actually record what's going on in front of your vehicle. So when you take this on a track, it will actually show you your RPM, your acceleration, and overlay that onto a camera image of recording the front end of the vehicle. So you can actually watch this like a POV video of a video game and see how you performed on a racetrack by using this performance data recorder. Now, another cool feature that I've shown before in other GM products is this rear backup camera. So this isn't just a typical backup camera like you would find on the rear of a license plate. This is actually located right above the rear antenna over here, and this essentially functions as a rear view mirror, and that way you don't see two heads in the back. Instead, you see an unobstructed view of the rear end. One more feature to point out is this vehicle does come with massaging seats. So you push this button and both the passenger and driver side will massage the seat back using the lumbar controls. The next cool feature is the Cadillac CT5-V has an air ionizer, which actually purifies the air and makes it cleaner and smell better inside of the cabin. That's not a first for Cadillac, but it is nice that this vehicle does have that. Now, my massage seats are working right now, and they're doing a pretty good job. They're not the best massage seats I've had in a vehicle, but it's better to have them than not have them. The next feature I want to point out on the interior is the 15-speaker Bose audio system. It does a really good job. I've tested the Bose audio system in other GM products, and I think it's a pretty good system overall. Personally, I like the Harman Kardon system the most out of all in-car audios, but Bose does a pretty good job, and I do like the way that speaker grille looks on the door panel. Okay, let me show you what the back seats look like, which still carry over that really nice interior dual color combo. Overall, again, really nice materials on the inside. You still have that same carbon fiber. Again, the Bose audio system, just your window controls as usual. And you do have quite a bit of legroom here. This is larger than a small sports sedan like the C-Class or 3 Series. That's why I don't compare it to those vehicles. I used to own a Mercedes C300, if you guys remember from the channel, and the legroom back here was much smaller than it is in this vehicle. And this is me sitting behind myself. You do get a really nice view of the front end. It does look really nice. Now, maybe a Mercedes does have a little bit of a nicer interior. This actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the previous generation BMW 3 Series in a way, but nonetheless, this is quite a bit cheaper like we discussed. You don't have any climate control settings in the back, which is kind of unfortunate. No heated seats back here either, which is something you're starting to see in other competitors, but you do have a power outlet. I do wish this was just a household outlet instead, and then you do have a USB port. Nothing much else to report. It is nice you do have a panoramic sunroof, but I do wish it was larger. And then you do have 2 cup holders here as well. Okay, opening up the trunk, it does have kind of an assisted open, but it doesn't have an automatic close or anything like that. It's not a bad sized trunk. It's a little bit on the smaller end in terms of opening, but it is pretty deep. I mean, it does go back in there pretty far, and then you can actually open up these seats even further to get even more room, although there's no controls back here to actually do that from the trunk. Over here, this is where your battery is located, and then over here on the right hand side, a little bit of a compartment to put some type of groceries or something. And then this is where that SD card for the performance data recorder goes. But now that we're done talking about the interior, let's get into the driver's seat and see how this vehicle drives. Okay, setting off in the CT5-V. This is what it looks like in the driver's seat. In terms of proportions, this does feel larger than a small sports sedan, like I was saying earlier. This has a nice little shifter over here. You put it into drive. Really nice gauge cluster, and I do think this screen is a little bit tilted back. Makes it sometimes a little bit hard to see, but I do like how it's integrated into the front dashboard of the vehicle. You know, first thing I've noticed just setting off is the brakes are really grabby. Oh, it's nice. The seatbelt just actually tightened up on me, kind of giving me a little bit of a tight snug. On this cold weather day, it knew exactly what I needed. And the heated steering wheel works really well. I've got it activated and it was just on for the last, 30 seconds and I can already feel it. Okay, now that was not full throttle by any means. It's a horrible day to do that, and I don't want to spin this vehicle out. But I could tell the vehicle was starting to pump in some of its own exhaust note in the back. I can't say it's a bad thing. It's just a little bit different because you don't have a large V8 engine to give you that power and that grunt. It kind of has to pump in some sound. Now, this road is by no means nice. It's quite bumpy and quite bad, actually. You can see this giant crack in the middle of the road, but this thing actually takes it really well. It's a pretty soft driving vehicle, better than I would expect from a performance type of vehicle. This thing drives pretty smooth, and this is a common thing amongst a lot of GM products. That's been one of my probably biggest improvements score for GM is its soft ride quality is one of its strengths for all GM products. I noticed that in the Equinox I reviewed and a lot of others, but let me do a quick acceleration here. Yeah, it's good. It's a good acceleration. I believe this is the rear wheel drive version, so I could tell it was starting to spin out. Definitely not the best weather to do this type of review in, but unfortunately, gotta make do with what you have. I do like the crackle and pop. That is nice. Yeah, the crackle and pop is really nice. I will say these paddle shifters, they feel a little bit on the cheaper end. They look like a kind of a chrome material. I'm not sure what they're made out of. Driving over these train tracks, yeah, this vehicle is actually amazingly soft. Better than I thought even when I first sat down in the vehicle. We just drove over that little pothole. Didn't really feel it inside of the cabin. This is probably the softest high performance vehicle I've ever reviewed. Now, in terms of the shifts, it does take a second to downshift. I like it. I like how this thing drives. It's got a almost a German-like feel to it in terms of its acceleration and sound, but it's not German. You know, it does have its own distinct Cadillac type of feel to it as well. Now the question I want to answer is, do you need a Blackwing? You know, do you want to spend, which, you know, in today's money, there's no Blackwing cheaper than like $110,000, $115,000. So is it worth paying essentially double what this vehicle costs for a Blackwing? Well, you know, the Blackwing is definitely going to be more fun, but I can't say this vehicle is not fun. I personally would not spend double the money to get myself into a Blackwing. If I got one for free, yeah, fantastic. But yeah, this vehicle is fun to drive. I mean, it's not the most powerful. It does have that turbo lag. You don't have that wicked, you know, head to the back of the headrest type of acceleration that you sometimes get with, you know, either supercharged or high displacement engines. This doesn't really have that. But again, this isn't the best weather for me to test it in. I'm sure if I did launch control, this thing would feel a lot snappier, and this weather is just atrocious for a high performance vehicle. But it's got the theatrics that you would expect from a high performance vehicle. And personally, I don't think the Blackwing is probably worth $110,000 to $130,000, especially because at that price point, you know, there is a lot of competition, and some of which may be better to get for $130,000. Whereas this thing at the $50,000 to $60,000 to maybe even $70,000 price range is really a good bargain. You get a performance luxury sedan with, you know, 360 horsepower, and it does feel like there's probably 360. You know, I do like the fact that you do have a lot of torque in this vehicle, which makes it a little bit more peppier than what you would expect from 360 horses. But you also get really nice infotainment. You get a luxury two-tone interior. You get a lot of tech here. I gotta say, if you can pick this vehicle up for about 60 to 65K, you're getting a really good vehicle. The other advantage about this vehicle over the Blackwing is you can get the CT5-V with all-wheel drive. You cannot get that with the Blackwing. So if you live in a climate like this, I would pick the CT5-V over the Blackwing. Does the German competition have more horsepower? Feel a little bit quicker? Yeah, it does. But they're also about $10,000 to $20,000 more for a vehicle with this size and this much technology. So you kind of have to take your pick. Do you want kind of the bargain performance sedan that really is still very quick and fun to drive, or do you want to spend more money and get something that's maybe a little bit quicker, a little bit of a nicer interior? It kind of just really depends on your budget. Well, there you have it, folks. That finishes off today's video telling you everything you need to know about the Cadillac CT5-V. Now, there are some pros and cons. Do I think it could be a little bit quicker? Yeah, I kind of wish it had a larger displacement V8 or something like that, but at this price point, you're not going to find anything better unless you make some big compromises. There are some really large pros to this vehicle as well, like really nice technology. You've got a pretty sizable and nice interior cabin where you could actually fit 4 full-size individuals and be able to take it on a road trip. You also have lots of really cool tech. It's still really fun to drive, and it's quick, especially if you get the rear-wheel drive version where you let the rear end slip out a little bit in weather like this. A lot of good things to this vehicle, and especially at a price point of around $60,000, you really can't find anything better. So I do hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly videos. Also check me out on all the social media at SchwayZ_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay SchwayZ, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day.